Hi all, welcome to BITR conference. My name is Jiazhen. I hope everyone is keeping well and stay safe. It's my pleasure to be here presenting my talk, Testing versus Monitoring. I have been wanting to talk about this topic since June 2019 because in June, something happens that profoundly changed my point of view in tests. I come from a developer in test background and I love TDD. However, in June, I never write a single test and I still feel confident and safe to do production releases. So I really want to share with you my story and how we can apply the DevOps practice to balance the testing and monitoring, which will help us build it right for the engineering team. So let me introduce myself first. Who am I? I am Jiazhen, a senior software engineer at Uswitch, part of RVU. My main focus is on products and the backend API, which will help the business. I do enjoy the open-ended challenges, and I also loved being a lifelong learner. I don't do Twitter too much, but you are more than welcome to follow me, comment about my talk, and any feedback will be appreciated. So let's talk about that, why it matters first. Why testing and monitoring are matters? Why do we need to compare them? They all seem independent. And in fact, in 1979, Glenford Myers gave a definition of software testing. He said, software testing is a process to find errors with executing a program or system. And software monitoring, on the other hand, is to observe the behavior of a system to determine whether it is consistent with a given specification. So both of them from the definition are independent. And in the software development life cycle, you can also tell they seems like isolated too, because you can run the testings before the code released to production. And also once the code onto production, you can perform the monitoring to get some alert. So they are totally fine to be independent. Then why that matters? Well, they are matters because we all have limited resources. The resources like time and people. We cannot spend all the things onto the quality just so that we have the best product in the world. The software only creates values when it delivers to the customers. So we can't spend all the resources in tests. As explained in this famous project management triangle, if you change the speed, cost, or scope, you will affect the quality. In other words, done quickly, low cost, high quality, you can only choose two. The areas that in the middle that possibly do it quickly with low cost and still have high quality doesn't seem to exist. But the question is it real? Can we have it all? Can we shift the quality code to production faster? Right now, I can tell you that the answer is yes. The things I will cover today are the practice and the culture. By building them right, we will have them all. Now, let's go back to the beginning. At that point, I was asked a series of questions. In what situation would you not do tests? What would your answer be? Well, my immediate answers at that point was no, without any hesitation and with super confidence. Why? Because I was thinking testing will give you the confidence and credibility. And in reality, testing is good at finding and fixing issues before we deploying into production. That will give us the confidence and credits, and both are really important to the business, which will make customer happy. And there are many types of tests we can do, like TDD, write the tests before you write any code, Selenium's automation, which will stimulate human interactions to help you automate the UI test. or even you could have a centric QA activity, which that the development will hands off to QA. And here is the examples of the release practice I used to have. In the Agile team, the dev will first complete the development and then hand it off to the QA team. Then the QA team perform the manual and automation tests at the end of the sprint. And last but not least, when it comes to deployed, we will need the ops guys to cautiously deploy our codes into the infrastructures. Now, every single release was done cautiously, as you can tell. Then how could you even think of skipping the tests? So that was the reason that I answered no at that point of time. And then I joined Uswitch. Oh, that's a wrong slide. But then I joined Uswitch, which is a comparison website. In June 2019, I was firstly working on releasing a big features to capture the customer address. Like you can see here, the customer will input their user address here and we will capture them. It has 3 variants, so the A/B tests will be needed. And you also have a complex business logic upon you click on the submit button. It was a big feature release, but even that is big, I noticed I started to skip the tests. That was so surprised to me. And the practice goes like, I develop the features locally, and then I done some manual and quick tests either on the local development environment and then deploy to staging and manually test it again. And the step 3 will be merge and deploy. Now it's live quickly. And last but not least is like, it was a big feature change. What surprised me is that I started skipping the tests, and the development and release practice that goes like, I develop the features locally, and then I manually and quickly check the changes on my local machine or even test it on staging. And then start again. It was a big feature change. What surprised me is that I started skipping the tests. The release practice now goes like, I develop the features locally and I done some manual tests and happy with that, quickly deploy to staging and perform another test as well with production data. And if I'm happy, I merge and then I got it deployed locally with a one local command. That's really quick without any ops intervention. And the step 4, I think is the most important part, is I monitor the product traffics and look at some graphs. All right, it feels weird at the beginning that with no full regression tests on the release, but gradually, after I've done it a few times a day in the same style without any tests, and I still feel confident and safe. I think, and then I noticed that at the peak time, the entire company could have up to 150 deployments per day. That is fascinating. That's the tremendous amount of deployments a day. And a lot of my time now spending on looking at the graphs and numbers. Hence, I get to know more about the business and why we are doing the change that we did and what it means to the business. And then at that point, I realized something has happened. And there's a learning here that the practice change and bring me get closer to a more productive. And then I know that something has happened at this point. There's a learning here that I need to unpack so that I know that my time now spending more on understanding what the feature means to the business rather than spending all on the tests. So I start to dive into that, and eventually I summarize that the practice comes from a few trade-offs. The team adapts the DevOps practice quite well and made the three major trade-offs here to balancing out the monitoring and testing. First one is shift UI test to monitoring, and shift right, I quote, to end-to-end test. And last but not least is to monitor the business. I will use the address capture example to explain these three major trade-offs, comparing them from the previous practice and with now versus the current practice. Let me talk about the first one, shift UI test to monitoring. Still in this address capture example, if in the previous Sentry QA practice, to ensure the three variants of the address form works properly, I might have to write a huge set of Selenium tests. Why? Because Selenium tests was so great. Automating UI tests will increase the QA productivity. And here is the example. Back in the day, we have a set of regression tests that will require 5 QA members to manually test it in 3 days. But in one afternoon, when I realized that Selenium automation exists, I built a Selenium script and completed the test just within 5 hours. I was so exciting, and so as well as the team. But maybe because it was too great, I overused it. I started to develop an automated script for every single page that we create and every single new features that we add. And the QA automation code base ends up with 31,000 lines of code, and the entire automation took an hour to run. But it's not too bad, this number. If the tests are reliable, I don't mind to wait for an hour and adding more Selenium scripts. However, the Selenium test is fragile. By that, I mean if you naively coupled the acceptance tests with the UI changes, you will run into problem. This will create many false positives. It's like the tests failed not because of a real bug, but rather just a checkbox has changed its name. And you might also run into the intermittent errors like shown in this diagram, that element is not shown. That may just because the JavaScript on that page hasn't been executed and you need to wait. And then you start to put in random wait. And more, you will realize that your test is becoming unreliable. Furthermore, keeping these tests in sync with the application will swallow up huge amounts of your time without delivering any values. Like I said, the software creates values only when it delivers to the customers. But all seems like the time has to spend on maintaining the intermittent errors in the Selenium tests, which is not great. And from a practical experience and a priori, and it was saying like for distributed application with GUID, the number time costs could be as high as 35 to 50%. Moreover, most of our web application nowadays has to support cross browsers. Then you have to perform the cross browser tests. Time costs here could be even higher than 50%. Then, so how can we avoid these tests? How can we avoid these costs so that we can ship the code fast? Well, in my adjust code from experience, I monitored the traffic instead, the production traffic, the A/B test traffic, just shown on this diagram. If there's a peak or dip on the graph, I will notice the errors immediately and then we will start to investigate or even get alert. We can identify the issues within minutes and start to analyze it and fix it, or even roll back if we couldn't quickly fix it. And with this monitoring, we don't have to maintain a set of Selenium scripts just to have satisfied our acceptance tests. This actually matches the test pyramid. In this test pyramid, there are 3 categories: UI tests, service tests, and unit tests. In the ideal world, it will be good that 70% of the tests are unit tests, hence 20% will be service tests, and the rest 10% is the UI tests. The practice now we made is to replace the UI tests with monitoring, so that we reduce the testing costs by 10%, and we still have confidence with our code and our capability of picking up the bug, and we will not be damaged. The second thing I want to figure out is that we use monitoring alert to replace some service tests. Still, the adjust from project is on the back. At the back is a event sourcing system, and events are fired at the back end when the users interact with the UIs, such as submit a form, and the message will send into the queue. Then we'll have some workers to consume the message and perform the business logic and put that in the database. Then how would you test this? Again, if I go back to my previous practice, the centric QA practice, my most naive and simple solution will be set up the entire testing environment locally and run the test. Setting up the test environment such as the web application that runs the UI, it could be a Node.js, and then I also have a queue service, either to come from a Docker image or install it locally. And I always need a local database as well, and then I need a schema. And then last but not least will be the workers to perform the business logic. This could take hours, and it will also making the local development very slow because you have so many things to set up. Maintaining this setup will always like a mini project. And according to an industrial testing yearly report, 80% of the agile team lost a third of their time or more on fixing the environment's issues. How could we avoid this? Well, the trade-off that we made here is to monitor the messages in the queue instead. So we take the practice to monitor the message in the queue, and you will see that if the message in the queue piles up, and you will get a problem. And you can also set up the appropriate alerts that say 50. If there are 50 messages in the queue that piles up, then an alert will fire and the team will get noticed. That's the way that you can replace the service test with the monitoring. And the third thing I want to talk about is monitor the business value. By that, in theory, if you take a step back, look at the big picture, service working doesn't mean the business is working. And we are now working for the company, so we always want to make sure the business is healthy and working. However, there's no unit tests can ensure you that. And also, to be honest, as long as the business is still making profits, the CEO or the SLT team won't even care if the servers are down. So we really need to focus on what's important on the business level. So on the business level, the practice that we made is to have the daily reports to check the important KPIs. Now, you all know that what the KPI is like. It could be the certain rate if you are a credit card company, or if you are a B2B, B2C company, you are checking your KPI of the profit or your investment on returns. Or even better, you can monitor the market share so that you know how you perform comparing to your competitors. Here is the examples that we we monitor the business value. It is a daily revenue report. You can check that the number if it goes on a daily basis or even an hourly basis, so that if it changes, if the number changes in the next hour, then you get notice and alert, and you come back and fix it. And I just used the quote here, come from a state of testing report from 2018. I can see that software testing fields become purely a DevOps shop. The line between testers and developers will become increasingly blurry. So by that, it actually means this practice will build is the culture to build. It will increase the productivity and is the chance to follow. So there are three trade-offs. To summarize, it's like there are three trade-offs that we made here. Shift UI tests to monitoring, shift right to end-to-end test, and monitor the business value. And if we do all these things, then we can bring the values to the customers quicker without wasting time on any fragile tests. And we can also ship the quality code to production faster and simplifies our development life cycle. And so that we can make 150 deployments per day with no fears of deployed. And by doing all of these things, we got extra bonus point, the blameless culture. Testing versus monitoring at the end is not just the difference in methodologies, it's the practical differences. And even in fact, it's the cultural difference. If we're doing this trade-off right, and we gain this bonus, by that, let me just unpack that a bit. And the QA reliance practice previously I have was discouraging the ownership. By that, I mean focusing on testing, like the waterfall model or agile development model, will hands off the deployment to a QA group. And the hands off somehow will means there's a lack of share ownership at the end product. The dev team or the QA team, they were just saying that, okay, it's into my step and I just perform my job and that's job done. No one cares if the product is on production and then was the change supposed to meet its requirements, do the things that it's supposed to do to the business. And it also is a greenhouse for the blame culture. One company that I work for, one day the manager shouted in Slack when the bug was found on production, who was the QA. I was also heard the next day that the QA was fired because of a production bug. So that's a wrong culture. I hope that you all agree. And this culture will definitely destroy the team by all means. And it also emphasized that how heavy the burden is on the QA team's shoulder if you use the centric QA approach. So with the trade-off practice that we made, now everyone is responsible to delivery, and everyone has the ownership to see it through once it get onto the production. And more importantly, the business now knows in order to ship fast, we are human, we will make mistake. The most important thing here is like the business knows that we learn from mistake. We will reveal the instance and avoid the same mistake again. To the engineers, to the team, it is a signal that it is safe to deploy to production, so that you don't have to cautiously deploy anything. And suddenly, the fear of releasing to production will gone. There's no more blame games. And if there's a bug, we just keep calm and carry on. We keep calm and fix it. The less we feel the individual burden of a deployment or a release cycle, the more time we can have to participate in team activities and share our learning and feedback. and the whole team will start to reflect and grow. But please don't get me wrong. The trade-off practice do not mean we drop all the tests. Like in the test pyramid, 70% of the tests are unit tests. The rest could be trade-off. That is my theory. That is the trade-off. And surely you will have your unit tests to cover your core KPI calculations in the backend. Whatever that do, that should be important to your business. For example, in Uswitch, we have a huge set of unit tests for our energy calculation, because that is really important to our end customer to know how much they can save every year. Or if you are a trading company, you don't want to make a 4-point rounding errors so that you will lose millions of pounds. So make sure that you have the unit tests heavy, but the rest of them trying to trade them off. And in here, the trade-off I meant to adapt the practice and the culture to your team, so that we can give 30% of our dev time back, and then our focus is now onto the business and onto the features, what the feature means to the business, and see the product through. So in the state of testing report 2019, the small testing is growing year by year, because more and more teams are adapting to this practice and make the right trade-off. And we all want to shift codes to production fast and with still high quality. So make the right shift, make the right trade-off, make the right move. We should shift the QA automations to monitoring. We should try to shift the end-to-end test to monitoring. And we should also monitor the business rather than the other tech stuff, because you want to understand the business. And together, we will build it right. And at the end, I just want to give a quick shout out for the company. We are RVU. We are part of Red Ventures group. We have a few leading UK brands, including Uswitch, Money.co.uk, and Bankrate. So, and we are hiring. So feel free to come and have a chat after the talk. And last but not least, I want to thank you all and the committees of the conference to give me the opportunity to present, and well done on organizing this virtual conference. Thank you.